Hi, Rabbi.
Hi, Neil. How you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. Just coming from work.
What kind of work do you do?
I'm an epidemiologist, but I work within the hospital, like healthcare epidemiologist.
Oh, okay.
I manage infection prevention and control programs.
Good for you. How long have
Perfect.
you been doing this for?
For the last 6.5 years, almost 7 now.
Good for you.
Oh, thank you, thank you, Baruch Hashem.
You know that, Rabbi, I told people 10 after 8, I told some people at 8:15, so we'll start at 8:15.
Yeah.
So will I be seeing you on Pesach time?
Yes, because I'm planning to fly back this week to prepare my house somewhat, and then a day before Seder night, the first night, and also do all the mitzvah cleaning out and everything, and then I will see you for Bezrat Hashem.
Good. When I was growing up in the 50s and 60s, everyone cleaned their house for Pesach. But now you have a lot of people going to hotels. And they
Really?
it's become common, I don't say common, but it's been normal today. People go to hotels, and therefore bypass line was cleaning. But when I was growing up, this didn't exist.
Yeah, but the thing is, even in hotels today, they do have kitchens and stuff, and people who come there before you, they may also have, eaten hametz, and I don't know how thoroughly they clean out everything in those hotel kitchens.
You mean kitchens and suites?
No, like the company, the agency right now, my healthcare agency, they booked me a hotel, and it's a studio. It's not even a suite. It's just a like 1-bedroom studio, and it does have a kitchen with all the utensils and everything, but I don't use them. I have everything disposable.
Well, that's one category, but the other category of people go to a hotel and they're wine and dine the entire 8-9 days. And
Oh, wow.
that's something which is in the last 20 years become popular for those people who can afford it. And it's very expensive, obviously.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know that. That's, obviously.
You go down to the Orlando area, literally have tens of thousands from Jews coming from the Northeast and from Chicago and Toronto.
Oh, wow. Wow. Well, since it was very common in Russian culture, when we didn't have bread, we ate potatoes. So this is what's gonna be like for me mostly when I travel back home for Pesach.
Why don't you get matzah?
Well, matzah too, but I'm saying like the actual, the bread. Since we're not allowed to eat anything leaven, so matzah is good. That's good for mitzvah, but I think sometimes it's good to have variety.
Remember that till the 16th century, in Europe did not know about potatoes. Those came later from Ireland. So till then, there was no bread, no potatoes, no rice, and very little.
Wow. Yeah, well, I think it's like even in Poland and Russia, they made latkes from potatoes too when they didn't have wheat.
Right, but you can't on Pesach. There was no potatoes then until second
Right.
century. There's no potatoes.
Right. It's just lately becoming more common theme, I guess. Cooking variety of food from potatoes.
Yeah, that's 500 years. But okay, let us begin. Good evening, everyone. Let me see if people are in the writing room. Okay, yeah, we're going to be discussing koshering your home and kitchen for Pesach. And again, many people in. As I mentioned last week, that chametz is more severe in three areas, both in Torah law, rabbinic law, and in terms of customs. It's more severe than other non-kosher food. As I said last week, other non-kosher food you can't eat, but you can give it to your dog, you can give it to a non-Jew, you can sell it, which means you can derive benefit from it. When it comes to chametz, you cannot eat it, you can't derive benefit from it either. Not only can you derive benefit from it, you can't even own it. You can't have in your house chametz. Now we know today we sell chametz and we keep in our house chametz. And as I said last week, this idea of selling chametz, giving your house, is something which is the list 500 years until about 500 years ago, when the Gemara talks about selling chametz for Pesach. You sold to the Gentile, it was cash and carry. You paid the cash and took it out. But in the 1600s, this changed. And the rabbis had to find a leniency in doing a way allowing people to keep the chametz in their homes. And the reason for that is that I said, I told you what the Bach said. The Bach was a leading rabbinic author of the 1600s. He said in Poland, where he lived in the 1600s, Jews were very restricted in what they could do. Jews were not members of the guilds, they were boxed out. They couldn't be carpenters, they couldn't be welders, they couldn't own land. And he says most Jews, over 50% of the Jewish population in Poland, which is very big, made whiskey. They had in their basements, they had whiskey distilleries, and they made whiskey. Now, whiskey is chametz. And therefore, to expect Jewish people to sell their chametz for a place no Gentile, where the Gentile will cash and carry, pay out cash on the barrel and carry out the whiskey, that's not going to happen. So they had to look for a legal loophole to be able to allow this. What they did was to create this loophole of selling it to a Gentile, and he'll put a down payment on it, small down payment. By virtue of that down payment, the whiskey the chametz becomes owned by the Gentile, and he owes you a debt, but it's his. It's legally his. And that's what I do before Pesach. I usually represent several hundred families, 400-500 families, and I will sell, as their agent, sell their chametz to this Gentile, and he will give me a down payment of $50. Now, the problem is that it's still my house. So what we do is we designate areas in the house where I put my chametz, a pantry, closet, a room, basement. And what I do is we rent out that area to the Gentile. It's part of the contract. He rents it out. We rent it out to the Gentile and we sell them the chametz. It comes out that the chametz is not on premises of a Jew, because if the pantry is rented out to a Gentile, it comes out that it's on the Gentile's property also. And then we know if the Gentile wants to come middle of Pesach and take his chametz, he has the right, it's his chametz. But we always get a Gentile who we believe is not going to do that, and who after Pesach will not be willing to pay back the rest of the money, and therefore we give him back some money, and and the chametz goes back to everyone in the shul who sold the chametz to me. So therefore, the idea of selling chametz last 400 years is where you keep the chametz in your home, and the chametz gives you, and God gives you a small percentage, that payment. Now, by the way, not everyone agrees with this. Other people will say that you can't do it that way. And there's some people that will not have any chametz in their home whatsoever. They won't sell their chametz. No chametz. That's a very stringent position, which even Chabad, who's very stringent, is not embraced. But there are some people like that. They feel that the idea of something comes to a Gentile just doesn't make too much sense. If you keep it in your house, and the Gentile will pay down payment. But for all practical purposes, most Jews do it, most Jews do it, and it's done. The problem is, if you have someone who's not sold the chametz to a guy, they invite you to the house, let's say in the summertime, and they offer you some Scotch whiskey, and that Scotch whiskey was owned by a Jew who's not from, but he owed him Pesach time. Then after Pesach, that Scotch whiskey becomes treif for any Jew. So you would not be able to drink whiskey in the home of a Jew in the middle of September, October, if you knew that Jew held the whiskey was in part of the Jewish home before Pesach, and that Jew doesn't sell his chametz to a Gentile, then that whiskey becomes prohibited forever. That's the side issue. It's an important issue. Usually, when it comes to, we used to have in Detroit supermarkets that was Jewish owned, who sold chametz on Pesach. Then I sold the chametz to the guy, and therefore those supermarkets' tradition was not to buy at those places for 1 month after Pesach. The assumption was after 1 month after Pesach, at that time, all the old stock of chametz was sold out, and there's a new stock of chametz. It used to be Great Scott, there used to be Farmer Jack, Jewish owned places. To the best of my knowledge now, in the Detroit area, we don't have any Jewish owned supermarkets, which is good in terms of that regard. If a Gentile has Pesach, chametz and Pesach is not a problem. So if a Jew has chametz and Pesach, which is not sold to a Gentile, so we have to Pesach, that chametz becomes prohibited forever for all Jews. We talked about the stringency of rabbinic law that chametz has. It comes to all of the things, most of the foods that is. If you have something which is treif, let's say we talk about chicken soup, which is cooking, and inadvertently some milk droplets drop onto the chicken soup. The ratio between milk and the chicken soup is probably 1 to 500. Mostly chicken soup. So the law is those droplets of milk become totally nullified, and there's no problem eating that mixture. On Pesach, though, if you have a small granule of chametz on Pesach that falls into 500 or 1,000 granules of something which is not chametz, we say the chametz nevertheless prohibits the entire mixture, even though the amount of chametz in the mixture is minuscule. But that's another severity that we have on Pesach. We're talking about the severity of kidneys, which are legumes. Ashkenaz Jews, for less than 1,000 years, have refrained from taking rice and peas and peanuts and corn. We gave 2 reasons for it. One of the reasons was that many of the rice fields were next to the wheat fields, and therefore you had many times wind taking the wheat and blowing it into the rice fields, the legume fields, the rice fields, and therefore it wasn't just rice; it was a mixture of rice and wheat. And if you cook that up, it can become chametz stick. That's one reason. There are other reasons also, but we know this idea of not having it's called kidneys by Ashkenaz Jews. There's a serious custom which has basically assumed the level of rabbinic prohibition. Once something is meant for 100 years by a group of people, it becomes their obligation to follow through on it. We also mentioned last week the Hasidic severity, but by Hasidim we don't take any matzah which has been in any way dunked in water. Matzah in water, the fear is that maybe the matzah was not baked initially well, and there might be some granules of flour which are on the matzah, and if you put it into water, put it into soup, those granules which were not cooked beforehand will now become leavened. So therefore we're demonstrating that on Pesach, we're much more severe on Pesach with the chametz than with throughout the year non-kosher foods. But let's deal with the preparing the kitchen today. And I have in front of me something reprinted from the OU, from Rabbi Elimelech. I'd like to go through with you and give you some of my comments on what he says. Sometimes I agree, sometimes I disagree. Mostly agree, but sometimes disagree. Let's deal first with the gas stovetop. First of all, there's a principle we have in halacha called kibola kachposa. The same way it enters is the way it's going to be expelled. And that's something which is relevant to, let's talk about pots and pans. We have a pot which is used for cooking and for soups and stews. So these stews and soups, let's say the chametz dip, and used before Pesach, and it's chametz. So it enters into the chametz, enters into the walls of this pot through the medium of liquid. And the way to get it out would be through the medium of liquid, dipping it into boiling hot water. It's called the kibola kachposa. When it comes to an oven and a stove, so therefore on stove, many times you cook things which are not necessarily through medium of water or liquid. Sometimes you'll fry things, you'll bake, and therefore the item becomes solid. And then you have the heat of the solid, something tray, which now becomes embedded in the walls of this vessel which was cooking in. So in the same way it was entered, it will be expelled. So therefore, in terms of stovetop, if you have an electric stovetop, we have first clean well the top of the stovetop itself, just clean it well, and cover it with foil. Stovetop many times has the top itself is not metal, porcelain. The top is porcelain. Porcelain is something which is it's clay terrace. It's something which comes from the ground. It's clay. It comes from something which comes from the ground. According to Torah, well, if you have, let's say, dishes, Chinese dishes, instead of China is earthenware. The Torah tells us earthenware cannot be kashered with hot water. You certainly can't kasher with fire either, unless it's earthenware, which is very strong, because fire is going to destroy it. So the Torah tells us that whereas when it comes to metal is porous. So if you cook, let's say treif meat or chametz, let's say you cook chametz in a pot before Pesach, and now you want to use the pot for Pesach. You have to kasher it. So the same way it entered, it will be expelled. But when it comes to earthenware and porcelain, that can't be kosher. Torah tells us it can't be kosher. It's not porous enough to expel everything. It might absorb, but it won't expel it, won't purge it. So therefore, what we got to do is we cover. It can't be kosher, so we cover it with foil, and the burner should be turned on until they glow red. Put it on the burners for around 15 minutes. That will do the trick.
Sorry, Rob, you're saying to wrap the earthenware, like the porcelain, in foil paper, and then you can
cover it with foil. The entire surface of the oven should be covered with foil. But when you put the pots, the burners, those burners should put on the pots are put on the burners. Those burners should be turned on until around 15 minutes. That will do it. That should do it. 10 to 15 minutes will do it. Then you're good to go. Now this is by a electric stove, because the electric stove, the burners will burn everything out. All the coils will be burned out. On the other hand, if you have a gas stove top, and you're able to take out the grates. So he says, take out grates should be cleaned well, not be used for 24 hours. And here again, the stovetop, which is porcelain, should be covered with foil, not on top of it. And the stovetop grapes, he writes, should be burned out in an oven 550. You don't have to have self-cleaning. Just put it as high as 550 for 1 hour. And that will kosher out. So he says again, the stovetop grapes can be replaced, so they should be burned out in the oven at 550 for 1 hour. The way I always did it a different way, and that is we divide our bottom, we do it by, in terms of the stovetop surface, top of the stovetop. Problem is that the grates, the fire doesn't touch every part of the grate. So if you put though over the grates, if you put a thick cookie sheet, put it on top of the grate, and you put it on for 10 minutes, so that cookie sheet will maintain all of that heat, and then the grates will catch it by themselves. It takes around 10 minutes to do. You gotta make sure that the cookie sheet that you put on top of the flame is not melting down. If you do it for 10 minutes, this will casher out the grates, and then you're good to go. So what he talked about putting it in an oven for an hour, for 550, I guess you can do that. I've never done that before that way. But it sounds a fair way of doing it. So again, so you're saying take out the grates. Also, the grates and the silver should be cleaned and not used for 24 hours for Pesach. That's important. So that's both the gas stovetop and the electric stovetop. Some of you might have a glass stovetop. He follows the approach, which I guess is the more normal approach, that glass stovetops cannot be kosher. But what you do is you cover them with tin foil. Shouldn't be used 24 hours. And he says that during Pesach, pot should not be placed directly on the stove surface, but rather on an aluminum or other metal disc should be placed directly under the pot. One should not cover the entire glass top surface with tin foil, but this might cause it to overheat and to crack. Don't do that. Now, what is the reason that glass stovetop presents a problem? The reason is the halach and Borman Shulchan is the same way the chametz enters, or some of the trev enters. That's the side of the vessel that you have to kasher out. So therefore, if you have an oven where things were, let's say you cook meat there, you broil meat in an oven, and if it was straight meat, the juice of that meat enters the walls. When you kasher out with a blowtorch, let's say, a blowtorch, so the blowtorch also is outside the wall, and you are kashering it the same way it entered, on the same side that it entered. It entered through the wall, and you're kashering that part of the wall. You're putting a blowtorch on that area of the wall. When it comes to a glass stovetop, he doesn't explain it. The reason is the following: when it comes to a stovetop, when you use it for chametz throughout the year, the chametz entered from the top, from above the glass stovetop, and entered into the glass stovetop. When you're kashering it, the coils are underneath the glass, so you're kashering from underneath. So it enters one side of the glass, you want to cash from the other side. So the normal opinion is that this cannot be done, can't be cashed this way. If it can't be cashed, so you got to do is he says you get a disc, some sort of metal disc.
Excuse me, Rabbi.
Oh, just 1 second. So again, during Pesach, what you do, you put rather on a metal disc, and therefore then there's no problem. So again, this is a more stringent opinion. There are others who claim that even the glass can be kosher because it's so hot. It's not losing whether it's from the inside, from the upside or downside. But the more normative opinion, which he's citing, is that it can't be really kosher. But certainly, what does it say here? There's no question you should kosher it out anyway. You should bring it to the highest for 10-15 minutes. And on top of that, you should put a disc and put the pot, the pots on the disc. Yes.
Yes, can you let Anita in? She's trying to get in.
Sure, she's in.
Thank you.
As we've gone through the gas stovetop, electric stovetop, and glass stovetop. 3 we've gone through. Those stovetop which can be kosher. Self-cleaning ovens, you can use them by turning on for an entire cycle with racks in place. Cycles around 3-4 hours. That will kosher the oven itself. But on the other hand, non-self-cleaning oven, when I was growing up in the 50s and 60s, we didn't have self-cleaning ovens yet, not at least where I lived in the Bronx. So the non-self-cleaning oven, you got to clean out the surface, the walls, the floors, the doors, the racks thoroughly, and do it with Easy Off, which is a caustic cleanser. That's something which is plaguing because it's caustic, doesn't taste good, has a negative taste to it, foul taste to it, and that helps the Koshering problem because it's foul taste to it. When something which is treif it's not edible, it's not called treif anymore. Anything which is not edible for a dog is not called food, which is the reason why most medicines, if the medicine you're taking is important to take, and it's not sweetened, it has no sweet taste to it, but it's regular medicine, which usually is not edible for a dog. Anything not edible for a dog is not called food. It's not called food. It's not a problem. It's not called chametz. Chametz is food. Chametz is like a food, loving food. So anytime medicines which are not sweetened are okay if you have to take them. There's sometimes if you get an option to get something which is non-chametzik, and you can take that, so it's always better. But if you have a serious situation, high blood pressure or diabetes or anything when you're serious, and you need the medicine, so you got to make sure that it's not sweetened, and then it's not called chametz. So here also, if you're going to take a non-self-cleaning oven, which doesn't reach 850 degrees, so it doesn't kosher itself properly. But if you add a caustic cleanser to it, like Easy Off, that helps the situation. He says they pay special attention to the thermostat of the window and edges of the chamber. Oven should not be used for 24 hours for Pesach. Place racks in the oven and turn the oven to broil for 60 minutes. So he says this is good enough. Truth of the matter, when I was growing up, we didn't rely on this. We had ovens that were not self-cleaning. We put in a metal insert. And because there's a metal insert, which is kosher Pesach, so there's separation from the food you're baking in the oven and the actual oven. The oven is chametz, but because we put an insert, we first clean the oven, then we also put up to the highest, and then on top of that, we put in an insert to make sure that when you're cooking, which is basically we're not being anyway touching the walls of the oven, which was the chametz oven. But in his opinion, he says if you just put on for 60 minutes, broil at highest heat, this is good enough. Okay, that's his opinion. I'm sure he has what to back OU has what to back it up on. But the truth of the matter is, most of us today in our homes have self-cleaning ovens. at least one oven self-cleaning. And that's what you should be using on Pesach. Self-cleaning. What else? Yeah, it's very clear. Moshe Feinstein's opinion that what I just said, the opinion of this rabbi should not be followed. But as either you have to use a blowtorch, which is hard to use, or as I said, self-clean it, or put an insert. Microwave. Microwave, many people will not use microwaves in Pesach. We will not use microwaves because microwave, we're dealing with plastic. Now, the difference with the issue with plastic, as I said before, that earthenware cannot be kosher. It tells us very clearly that earthenware can't be kosher because we put it in something hot water. It's not going to purge all the iser, the belua, all that was absorbed in the walls. It will not be purged by hot water. On the other hand, metal and wood, if you boil it, the hot water will expel everything. The Torah, as you know, I don't know if you know, but the Torah does not talk about plastic because plastic was not around the time the Torah was given. And therefore, when it comes to plastic, there's no question whether it can be kosher or not. And therefore, those, especially on Pesach, will not use a dishwasher, will not use a microwave because they're plastic, and therefore, so have to know whether it can be kosher or not. If you have a dishwasher which is stainless steel, then hot water can do the trick because it's stainless steel. Torah tells us that stainless steel, metal can be purged of any ingredients, any glue, anything it has in the walls, absorbed in the walls. But not plastic.
So, Rav, quick question. So, for example, if I'm not planning to use microwave or like oven where typically I bake some sort of like, kosher pizza, but if I clean it out completely from hummus and it just stays there, so it's not a problem, right? As long as I don't bake or cook in them.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes. If you don't use it, the fact that it's hummus, you have absorbed in the walls chametz, that's not something which is in violation of Torah. The prohibition is owning chametz which is visible. But chametz which is absorbed in a vessel is not visible, and therefore one can hold on to it, just make sure it's not used. Right, so therefore, the many people will not use microwave oven, but on the other hand, there are some who will. If you use microwave oven, the microwave must be cleaned well, not used 24 hours. The glass turntable should be removed and replaced with a new kosher prepared surface. The styrofoam cup should be filled with water and boiled in the microwave for 10 minutes. The cup should then be refilled and moved to another spot, and the process will be repeated for 10 more minutes. Cardboard or contact paper should be taped over the glass window pane for the duration of Passover, because the glass window pane is plastic. And if it's glass, also it's a problem because the status of glass, here we have another diversion between the Sephardic Jews and Ashkenazi Jews. Sephardic Jews are really, when it comes to glass, they use the same glass for milk and for meat, and for chametz. They follow the approach that glass doesn't absorb anything. Don't even have to kosher it. It doesn't absorb. They follow that approach. Ashkenazi Jews say to the contrary, that glass can't be kosher. Even if you want to kosher, you can't kosher it. When it comes to Pesach, we certainly try to be machmer, try to be stringent. And we don't kosher glass, at least for use for hot stuff on Pesach. So again, to repeat, when it comes to microwaves, there are those like myself, other people who will not use microwaves because it's plastic, and no question whether you can kosher plastic. But many people use it, and they rely on the sheet that it can be kosher. You gotta clean that well, maybe use it for 24 hours for Pesach. And then fill it up with water 2 times, 10 minutes a shot, and you're good to go. Microwaves are not that expensive, so therefore it shouldn't be difficult to get a kosher to get a microwave. But again, if you want to use your own microwave and rely on those opinions that it's okay, by all means, you can go ahead and do it. Silverware, pots, and other small items. By the way, we're gonna have in shul this coming Sunday. You can bring in your pots and pans or silverware to be kosher. There'll be a small fee, but we have it each and every year. Danny Separum will be doing it this Sunday. So again, this Sunday, anytime during the daytime, he will be here later in the afternoon, so you can drop it off in the morning or afternoon, and he will take care of it. So that by next morning or that evening. But if you want to do it by yourself, silverware pots and other small items, it's got to go boiling water. The rolled lips, seams, or cracks which cannot be cleaned will require torching of those areas. You can get yourself a small hand torch and I will do it. You just focus the fire on that area for going back and forth on 20 times. That does it. Utensils should be immersed one at a time into a pot of boiling water that is on the fire. So therefore, the water has to reach a boil, bubble, and then you put in the silverware. One at a time, for each one for around 10-15 seconds by itself. And by the way, there's another custom we have, a custom by Ashkenaz Jews for hundreds of years, that we don't kasher something from middle hooks to fleshes, from fleshes to middle hooks. We're afraid that people might start forgetting whether now it's fleshes to middle hooks. So therefore, the Ashkenaz Jews have this custom of not kashering during the year their pots from fleshes to middle hooks and vice versa, pots and pans. On the other hand, on Pesach, if you're kashering it anyway to make a Pesach dish, once you're kashering and Pesach to make a Pesach dish, so then you can do it from dairy to flesh or flesh to dairy. So let's say you have a set of silverware which is milchik, you want to make it fleshes. So before Pesach, you can kasher it out to make it usable for Pesach. And once you do that, you can change your status from milchiks and fleshes to fleshes to milchiks. That's what's done many circles. So the utensils should be immersed one at a time in a pot of boiling water that is on the fire, and the water should be boiling with bubbles. Water should be allowed to return to a boil before the next item is placed in the pot. The pot can be non-Pesach, provided it's clean. It's not placed for 24 hours. And the water is first boiled in the pot and discarded. Large items can be submerged in the water one part at a time. You're not going to do one shot, one part at a time. Utensils should then be rinsed in cold water. What about your sink? We have a stainless steel sink, so steel can be kasher. First we're going to remove the drain. The drain is always tough to kasher out because the drain has very small holes to it. And something that has very small holes, the fear is that the water might not get through the holes and clean it out properly. It is recommended that the drain be replaced. But this is difficult, it may be used if the drain has large holes that can be completely scrubbed clean. Or what you can do is have a small fire, a small blowtorch, and then therefore the holes in that drain will be kashered with that small fire from the blowtorch. You can put it on for 10-15 seconds. Ceramic sinks cannot be kashered and must be covered. Again, ceramic is earthenware. Earthenware can't be kashered. Torah says it can't be kashered. It's not going to, hot water is not going to purge that was in the walls. So if you have a ceramic sink, don't use it 24 hours for Pesach. The sink must be completely clean and dry. The sink should be covered with layers of contact paper or foil. And it's best to purchase a sink insert. I know in New York is available. Some things they have in New York usually take around 30, 40 years for us to get in Detroit. We're around 30, 40 years behind New York. But you go to New York, you have these sink inserts, that metal inserts, which are popular. And I'm not sure whether One Stop carries this or not. They might.
They do.
Do they?
Yeah, I bought them a couple years ago. I don't know about now.
Okay, that's good to know. The sink faucet, including the hot faucet, the inside. So it says attach any filters or nozzles. And use either hot water will wash it out.
So Rob, is it just hot water or it's actually like boiling hot water from
Boiling hot water, yes.
So I have seen how rabbis, for example, sometimes they take that kettle and they fill it with water and they put they put it in the socket and wait until it boils, and then without unplugging the kettle while water is boiling, they're like pouring over the counter. Is that the way to do the faucet?
That's the best way to do it, but it's hard to get. I haven't seen those types of pots for many years. Then you're talking about you have a pot which the water keeps on boiling. Usually, when you take the water off the stove, you start pouring, the bubbles stop bubbling.
Right.
Therefore, I didn't want to mention this, but there is ideally what should be done if you take a piece of hot metal, take a screwdriver and heat it up, and you have on one end you have the hot metal, the hot screwdriver. You put it next to, you put it right by the surface of the sink, and you pour hot water onto that. This way, the hot metal will reinvigorate the hot water. But that's already something that is more complicated. But I didn't want to talk about that. But if you're able to get the hot water, which is cooked up by electricity, and keep them boiling, that's the best thing.
Okay.
Now, if you have
Rabbi,
yes.
I have a cast iron pan. Can I just boil the water in it?
Yeah, brother, well, then you have to make sure though that you put some piece of metal in it when it's finished to make sure the water boils over.
Okay. Or stick it in a super hot my sink is stainless steel. After I kosher the sink, can I put the pan in the sink?
If it's a pan, the best way to do a pan is to put it upside down over the stove.
Okay.
And put it on fire and put it upside down. It's going to kosher it out.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Now, what about countertops? So if it's a stainless steel countertop or granite countertop, or even formica, what you do is first pour boiling water and be able to use a hot piece of metal with it. That's great. There are different opinions whether quartz or formica countertops can be kosher for Pesach, and therefore, because there's a question about it, it's really better to cover it for entire Pesach. Like ceramic countertops cannot be kosher; it must be covered. The counter should be covered with a water-resistant covering. When it comes to formica, because there's a question whether it can be covered kosher or not, it's better to cover it. For tables, although wooden tables can be kosher with hot water, the common custom is to clean the tables well and then cover them. The tables can't be exposed. Anything that throughout the year comes in contact with chametz cannot be exposed. Comes in contact especially with hot chametz, it's got to be covered. So therefore, and ceramic can't be kosher. So there certainly has to be kosher. And if even something like Formica, which is a question mark, it's better to have them covered. Refrigerators and freezers and food shelves and pantries, clean and cover. These areas should be thoroughly cleaned. Paying special attention to the edges where crumbs may get trapped. The surfaces should be lined with paper or plastic. Refrigerators and freezers will operate more efficiently if holes are poked in the lining to allow airflow. Tablecloths and kitchen gloves, aprons, and other fabrics, other items. Washed fabric items can be koshered by washing them with detergent and washing machine set on hot. Items should be checked to make sure that no pieces of food remain attached. Water cooler. In addition to pouring boiling water over tap, replace water bottle. So all your taps should be, you pour hot water over the taps, boiling hot water. Dishwashers, how well can you kosher dishwashers? We'll get, as I said, this goes to the issue. Most dishwashers are not metal. If it's metal, stainless steel is not a problem. It can be kosher. But even there, got to be done away where the water is very hot, boiling, which is not easy to get to. But commercial dishwashers are able to reach the point of boiling. But the dishwasher got to be totally metal, because as I said before, earthenware cannot be kosher. What about your electric mixer? Not recommended because of the difficulty in cleaning out the housing of the mixture from the fine particles of flour. One should not use their year-round mixer on Pesach. Mixer blades can be cleaned and kosher with hot water. Baby high chair covering. The tray should be covered with contact paper. The seat, legs, and bars should be wiped down with a soapy rag. That's what I have over here on this three-page sheet of paper, 3 pages of general cautioning, with my comments on this, my opinions on this. Any questions what we studied today?
So would a Clorox wipe suffice for like a cleaning prior to covering?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yep, no problem with that.
Also, I know, Rabbi, for example, when we immerse the vessels, we do say the Tevila Kilim bracha. Is it the same bracha for koshering countertops?
No, there's no blessing.
Okay.
There's no blessing for that. The blessing is done when you put in the mikvah. Doesn't mean the blessing.
Okay.
Any questions on koshering your house for Pesach?
I actually saw some people even covering TV and like all the TV countertops.
It's good to cover the TV all year.
Very witty answer, but I'm just
Anything which comes in contact with bread gotta be cleansed, has to be cleaned. That's
Yeah.
why it comes to books. If you have, so there's some people read books by their table, the breakfast table, lunch and supper. They read books. Those books that they read during the year gotta be checked out. They have to bang out the crumbs. The crumbs between the papers is a problem. And so therefore, koshering a home for Pesach takes a lot of effort. You know, there are many books which you haven't looked at for forever. But those books that you've been reading during this year got to be checked.
Yeah.
Bang them out.
Yeah, I just Googled some images last night about from like Orthodox Jewish homes on Pesach. Everything is tinfoil covered. That's why it was killer.
Yeah.
Rabbi, how do you kosher the silver Kiddush cups?
Boiling hot water. You put in, you don't even put 24 hours. You put in boiling hot water, and then you take them out and you rinse it with cold water, and you're good to go.
Thank you.
one more question. This is just something for the future that I'm curious. So, for example, if I buy a brand new, I'm not using, I'm not going to plan to use something like stove or whatever, but if I, for cooking purposes only, if I buy something like a temporary countertop grill and it's only used for Pesach, can I like wrap it up after Pesach and keep it for next year for Pesach?
Sure, of course.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, that's it. We'll meet next week. Next week we'll discuss the Haggadah. This year is a interesting Haggadah because this year's Friday night Shabbos. Shabbos brings with it some interesting issues and problems, but it's all doable. We'll discuss next week. Shabbos Pesach, Shabbos. This Shabbos, let me remind you, it's triple header. Every several years we have a triple header where we have 3 Sefer Torahs we put out. One is the regular Torah of Zriya, one is the Chodesh, and one on top of that is Shabbos HaChodesh. We have 3 different Sefer Torahs. According to many versions, this is the year we have 3 Sefer Torahs out, and we take out 3 Sefer Torahs from the Ark. We brought down that a person who prays to God during those moments, his prayers will be answered. So it's time to make sure you're in shul for opening the Ark, taking out the Sefer Torahs when you see 3 come out, and pray for what you want to pray for. Good health, Mashiach, Parnasa, Shidduchim, Nachem Shoshim, Hashem. Okay, we'll meet again next week at 8:15, Hashem.
Thank you very much, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Have a good Shabbos.
Shabbos.
Yeah, you have a great Shabbos.
Thank you. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom to you too.